I read from the FBI Office of the Inspector General report, which was publicly released in June 2006. In this section of the chapter, the Office of the Inspector General concluded that the evidence shows that the FBI was not made aware that during the early 2001 debriefing, the source identified Khallad in the photographs of the Malaysia meeting. Title: OIG concludes regarding whether the FBI was aware of the source's identification of Khallad in the Kuala Lumpur photograph. From the report, a review of the FBI's handling of intelligence information related to the September 11th attacks. We concluded that the evidence shows that the FBI was not made aware that during the early January 2001 debriefing, the source identified Khallad in the photographs of the Malaysia meetings. Agent Max insisted in this interview with us that he was unaware of the identification of Khallad and that he was not even aware of the existence of the Kuala Lumpur surveillance photos until after the September 11th attacks. Neither Max nor the CIA case officer specifically recalled the early January debriefing, but the documentary evidence supports this conclusion. In numerous CIA and FBI documents discussing the source and the early January debriefing, other important information from the source is described, but the source's identification of Khallad in the Kuala Lumpur photograph is never mentioned. Given the importance of the identification and the other details reported in the documents, we believe such information would have been included had the FBI been made aware of the identification. For example, as described above, in the CIA case officer's cable reporting the December 16 debriefing of the source, during which the source had identified Khallad in the Yemeni photograph, the CIA officer specifically noted that Alat heard the identification and that the identification was repeated for the benefit of him. Max said that he recalled this debriefing and the identification of Khallad being brought to this attention by the CIA case officer. By contrast, in his cable reporting the early January source debriefing, the CIA case officer did not state that he brought to the attention of Max the identification of Khallad in the Kuala Lumpur photographs. Likewise, in his cable describing the logistics of the debriefing, the CIA case officer provided a description of what was discussed with the source and stated that Max was present for a significant portion of the meeting with the source, but did not mention any Kuala Lumpur photographs or that the CIA case officer had brought the identification of Khallad to the attention of Max. The documents prepared at the time by Max about the early January debriefing also suggest that Max was not aware of the identification of Khallad in the Kuala Lumpur photographs. For example, in response to the cold case agent's January 9 email, specifically requesting all the source knows about Khallad, Max did not include any information about the Khallad identification from the Kuala Lumpur photographs. This was shortly after the early January debriefing, and the case agent had specifically indicated his interest in any information about Khallad. Max's January 16th electronic cable to FBI headquarters, in which he described at length what the source had reported in the early January meeting, also did not mention the identification of Khallad or that any Kuala Lumpur photographs were shown to the source. In addition, Max prepared an FD 302 to document the source's identification of Khallad from the Yemeni photograph to provide documentation for the criminal investigation. We believe that if Max had known of the source's identification of Khallad in the Kuala Lumpur photos, he likely would have prepared a similar FD 302 of that identification as well. We also found that the New York field office agents who interviewed the source overseas in February of 2001 were not made aware of the early January identification of Khallad. The agents insisted that they were completely unaware that any Kuala Lumpur surveillance photographs had been shown to the source, or that the source had identified Khallad in any photographs other than the Yemeni-provided photograph. In addition, we found no documentary evidence that the New York FBI agents were even aware of the Malaysia meetings or the resulting surveillance photographs at the time they interviewed the source. Because the agents were keenly interested in Khallad and had asked the source to confirm the identification of Khallad from the Yemeni photograph, we believe the agents would have noted, remembered, and acted upon any information regarding another Khallad identification. We also believe that had the FBI known about the identification of Khallad in the Kuala Lumpur photographs, they would likely have stored information about the other participants in the meeting, including Khalid al-Mihdhar and Awaf al-Hazmi, which could have increased the FBI's chances of locating them before the September 11 attacks. Due to the Office of Inspector General's lack of complete access to CIA employees and documents, we were unable to fully examine why the CIA did not inform Max or the New York agents that the source had identified Khallad in the Kuala Lumpur photographs at the early January debriefing. We believe the FBI should have been made aware that the joint FBI-CIA source had provided such significant information about the person purported to be the mastermind behind the USS Cole attack. This failure demonstrated significant problems in the communication between the FBI and the CIA. However, the FBI employees' inaccurate belief that CIA reporting in TDs was comprehensive contributed to the FBI's failure to obtain this critical piece of information. We discussed this and other systematic problems that this case revealed in the analysis section of this chapter.